Hello and welcome to Spotlight. Tehran and Moscow have signed a comprehensive strategic partnership agreement. The much-anticipated signing ceremony was held in the Russian capital, Moscow. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin hailed the agreement as a new chapter in relations between the two countries. For Iran, the deal provides avenues to bypass U.S. and EU sanctions through trade in national currencies, barter systems, and alternative payment mechanisms. Let's take a look at some of the details of that agreement in this report.
Tehran and Moscow have signed a comprehensive strategic partnership agreement in Moscow. Following the signing ceremony, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian hailed the agreement as a new chapter.
The partnership treaty that was signed today opens a new chapter in relations between Iran and Russia in all spheres, especially in the trade and economic cooperation. I'm confident that this treaty, which has been drawn up on the basis of areas of mutual interest, will create new pathways for expansion of new and bright horizons in collaboration between Russia and Iran.
The deal provides avenues for Iran to bypass US and EU sanctions through trade in national currencies, barter systems, and alternative payment mechanisms. The two sides agreed to help each other counter common security threats. They also agreed that if either side was subjected to aggression, the other would not provide assistance to the aggressor. Iran and Russia will also support expanding bilateral trade and economic cooperation in all areas. Russian President Vladimir Putin also hailed the agreement. He said both his country and Iran are resolutely opposed to external pressure from abroad.
Our countries firmly uphold the principles of the rule of international law, the sovereignty of states, non-interference in the internal affairs of other countries. We are pursuing an independent course on the world stage, jointly and resolutely opposing external pressure.
The document is expected to bring relations between Moscow and Tehran to a new level. It enshrines their status as strategic partners. The agreement also establishes a legal framework for the further development of cooperation in the long term. According to Russian and Iranian officials, the agreement covers all spheres, including defense, counterterrorism, energy, finance, transport, industry, agriculture, culture, science, and engineering. Many believe that the partnership elevates Iran's diplomatic stature, showing that it can forge significant alliances despite Western isolation efforts.
Well, here are our guests for tonight's show. Activist and commentator Mick Napier joining us from Glasgow. And we also have journalist and podcaster Esha Krishnaswamy joining us from St. Petersburg. Welcome to the program, to the both of our guests. Mr. Napier, let's discuss the significance of this agreement and its implications both regionally and globally.
Well, it's what one would call a no-brainer. Both Russia and Iran have been subjected to what Donald Trump calls maximum pressure from sanctions, from attempts to damage the economy, from attempts to cause regime change through increasing pain on the populations of each country. It's difficult to see how much further they could go, but it's already two very extreme regimes of sanctions that America has imposed on Russia and on Iran separately. So it makes perfect sense for them to deepen relations economically and politically. I mean, we now have a full spectrum almost relationship between these two important states. Both of them also have warm relations with China. So you now have a bloc stretching from the Baltic in Europe to the Pacific. And, you know, America takes on one opponent at a time, and an opponent means any country which refuses to bow the knee, any country which shows signs of independence from the American imperium. But when this bloc comes together, I think you have something which America might break its teeth on economically, because this is simply a huge bloc, a huge economy, a huge couple of economies coupling. They have much to gain from each other. And I think it gives each of them, both of them, defenses against this long-standing American economic aggression, you'd have to call the sanctions, and clear attempts at regime change in Tehran, and I think even attempts at regime change in Moscow. So this is a perfect riposte to outgoing Biden and to incoming Trump, and I think it will give them a bit of a headache in Washington about how to deal with this.
Ms. Krishnaswamy in St. Petersburg, this strategic partnership is being described as a milestone in Iranian-Russian ties. Let's talk more about the key components of the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Agreement and what stands out the most for you in this deal.
The one that stands out most is the alternative payment methods and the use of and the de-dollarization, as in Russia and Iran have agreed to use tumans and rubles as opposed to any third-party currency. And that is the first step in trying to lay the multipolar world and to cut the U.S. ability to sanction at will, because the U.S. relies on the fact that most international trade is done on the dollar. And if it's not done on the dollar, they don't have the same ability. Their sanctions won't have the same devastating reach as it would if the dollar was, as long as the dollar is ubiquitously used, their sanctions tend to have a bigger impact, and this will help reduce that. Another thing that's very interesting is that one of the facets of cooperation is against terrorism. And we know that Iran has a lot of terrorist activities coming from the West with Al-Qaeda type sympathizers, etc. And so does Russia. And it is also a way to signal that they plan on opposing the new Syrian government if they are to trample upon the rights of different people. And also trying, and so that's another thing that stands out. And the third thing that stands out is the sharing of intelligence. So I think that will make it much easier for them to oppose Western actions within the region that is getting more and more belligerent.
Sure. And Mr. Napier, in what ways can this agreement allow both countries to counter, bypass, and circumvent Western sanctions?
Well, I'm not an expert economist, but the fact that these two blocs, these two sizable economies come together and remove barriers to trade, can develop methods of payment bilaterally, which do not rely so heavily on the dollar. The dollar, the dominant position of the dollar in international trade has in many ways been the key weapon that America has used. They deploy aircraft carriers, but they also deploy the almost forced use of the dollar in international trade to insulate America from the normal laws of gravity, of economic gravity that other countries face. America can print massive amounts of dollars and then spend them and then put them into the international market. These two economies coming together, the great opportunities for bilateral trade and trade with other countries indirectly as well, as I said earlier, I think creates a great headache for Washington. The size of the bloc, the power of the bloc, gives it immunity in its own right. So looking forward, we expect trade to rise. We expect the complementary industries. Russia is the largest exporter of oil in the world. Iran's a major producer. The possibilities for synergies between these two industries is huge. And I think, once again, the very size of the bloc, the removal of the barriers to trade, the possibility of avoiding the use of the dollar for a big chunk of world trade here is extremely significant going forward. And once again, the fact that both countries are in BRICS is also very important. So something is coming together in a way that wasn't there 20-odd years ago, a system of alliances of various different strengths, But within this system of alliances that BRICS represents, we have an intensification and a qualitative development of the alliance between Iran and Russia, which could very well spread, could provide an example for other countries facing these harsh, vicious sanctions from the USA if they dare to oppose core aspects of imperial policy. So I think it's a very powerful example, as well as something which can be expected to erect defences around both countries because the internal barriers will be coming down.
Ms. Krishnaswamy, what specific benefits does Russia gain from increased bilateral trade with Iran? There's, of course, the energy collaboration, joint infrastructure projects like the North-South Transport Corridor. If you can tell us more, and also the same question that we issued to Mr. Napier, how can enhanced economic cooperation between Iran and Russia insulate both countries from Western sanctions?
The primary way is through building of alternative monetary systems. Like right now, everyone has to go through SWIFT, and that is controlled by the U.S., and they can pull it any time, as they've done with Iran many times. So that's the first thing. Russia makes a lot of crude oil, but they need refineries that Iran can build. And so right now, that would help enhance the trade. And also, since both countries are sanctioned, they can trade with each other to get products without worrying about sanctions. So both countries can enhance availability of more consumer products with their technology. And so I think those are the main ways. And if like Russia, big countries like Russia, Iran, China, etc., start moving away from the dollar's hegemony, that will give incentive to smaller countries to also join, because it will give the smaller countries an alternative. And we've already seen some countries in their trade with Russia and China and Iran are not using the dollar. So I think that is the main thing, is that it takes away power from the West to engage in economic warfare. Also, with regards to the West constantly tries to coup both Iran and Russia through, like in 2022, they had the color revolution. And if they're sharing more intelligence and cooperation, that means that the West is unlikely to succeed in these color revolutions that they constantly try in both countries.
Okay, Mr. Napier, this partnership, as we mentioned, enhances economic, political, and security cooperation between the two nations. But can enhanced collaboration with Russia also amplify Iran's voice in international forums like the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and BRICS?
Now, of course. I mean, just in passing, both countries face very concerted attacks from the US-led collective West. Russia faces a war in Ukraine due to NATO constantly encroaching without any limitation to its appetite on Russia, building bases along the border. Iran obviously faces a bitterly hostile United States and Israel, who are trying to find allies in the Middle East, and obviously want to inflict the maximum damage.
Okay, I believe we're experiencing some technical difficulties there. I'm going to allow my colleagues to figure that out, but we're going to address another question to Ms. Krishnaswamy in St. Petersburg. Esha, what message does this agreement send to the U.S. and its allies? More importantly, that we're just a few days away from Trump taking office again. Do you think that this signals a united front against external pressures from NATO, particularly in the context of the ongoing tensions with the U.S. and Israel when we're looking at what's happening in the region right now?
Absolutely, because it sends us a message that Iran is not alone in this fight. If Russia is going to back up Iran like it did with Syria, it's going to be much more difficult. The U.S. and Israel have for decades had a desire to overthrow the current system of governance in Iran. for a government that is more malleable to U.S. interests, and with increasing, with Iran getting increasingly involved in other areas within in the region, such as in Yemen and Lebanon, it'll make them think twice before trying to attack those smaller countries with much weaker militaries. So I think that is the message they want to send. And yeah, that's about it.
Okay, Mr. Napier, we lost you there for a moment. I'd like you to pick up where you left off regarding the voice of Iran, amplifying the voice of Iran in organizations such as the SCO and BRICS.
Of course. The US works assiduously, and its allies work in a very determined way to isolate both Russia and Iran. It's quite simply a checkmate, in a sense, when the two come together in this way. Russia faces an attack from the West, from NATO, from the collective West, which is extremely serious, determined to inflict maximum damage on Russia, determined to inflict a strategic defeat to leave Russia much weaker, and NATO is explicit about this. On the other hand, in the Middle East, America is trying to build, with some success, a coalition, including Israel and some Arab countries, against Iran. In that situation, to have your back covered changes things very dramatically. And it means that both countries can face their enemies, can face the attackers with a greater degree of confidence. This can be based on military trade, it can be based on secure borders because there's a strategic alliance, it can be based on economy, and of course it can be based on military cooperation as well. The idea of tackling one of these countries and bringing it down and then moving on to tackle the other one, that's now gone. You have to take on both at the same time. And although the agreement falls short of a military partnership whereby an attack on one would immediately lead to joint military action by both, it's still significant. And the West will see it as very significant. So the specific weight of Iran internationally has just been increased. Russia breaks out of its isolation to a greater degree, but Iran also benefits from the fact that Russia is one of the founding members of BRICS, has solid relations with both India and China, for example, the two gigantic powers in the world now, and Iran is now part of that loose alliance of BRICS, but it certainly provides protection against America, and it certainly increases the number of governments who will be developing warmer relations with the Islamic Republic.
Ms. Krishnaswamy, can you explain how this partnership supports a multipolar global order? That's definitely a joint vision shared by Iran and Russia, the goal of challenging the U.S.-led unipolarity and conjuring a multipolar global system. Many say that we could be at the beginning of a shift in superpowers from the West to the East.
Absolutely. In one way, it strengthens the industrial base of both Russia and Iran. The second way is definitely, as I mentioned, de-dollarization and getting away from the dollar hegemony, because the dollar is used as a weapon in so many U.S.-led sanctions. The third way is that the third way is, of course, right now, countries are forced to take on loans from the IMF or World Bank for quote-unquote development projects. With countries like Russia and Iran, they don't have the same kind of agreements of privatization, austerity, etc., that they give to loans. So with third-party countries, Russia and Iran together may be able to lessen the effects of IMF structural adjustments programs. So I think those are the ways it strengthens it. And another thing is that Russia is a member of the UN Security Council, which means they have a unilateral veto power. So Iran, so when Iran comes to the UN with its interest and with Russia's cooperation, they will have more of a voice within the UN Security Council in order to move their issues forward. So I think those are the main three ways.
Mr. Napier, there's definitely another viewpoint to all of this. What do you, in your opinion, what are the potential long-term implications of this partnership for the geopolitical landscape in West Asia? During the Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian's speech at the signing ceremony, he blasted foreign intervention in the region, stressing that there is no need for extra regional players there.
I think what's unique about what some people in Europe and America call the Middle East, in West Asia, I think what's unique about it is that there is a state in the area which has been planted and developed by Britain and then by the USA called Israel, which is a foreign intervention into the area. Not just like a couple of permanently staged aircraft carriers, but something even more powerful. And that acts very much as an agent of the collective West. So anything which challenges that, which brings together Russia and Iran, is something to be welcomed. But here's the problem. The problem is that when the balance of power changes in the world, and if we take a long view historically, when Germany was rising as a strong economic power, and Britain and France ran most of the world as colonies, that rebalancing was decided by global war or by an international war. So now that China, and following that, there was a period when there was a balance between two superpowers, the Soviet Union and America was kept in check. With the collapse of the Soviet Union, we went into the recent stage of a unipolar world where America could crash its weight around, overthrow governments one after the other. But now, with the changing balance, I think it's very complex in West Asia, because now that America is weakening and is, by the way, clearly determined to damage the Chinese economy in every way that it possibly can to preserve US domination as long as possible. But in that situation, with America weakening, it's dangerous because their strength in West Asia will diminish. But I think that might mean that they give more investment, more arms, have more reliance on Israel to try to attack neighbouring countries that displease the USA. It's difficult to see how that's going to play out, because Israel also has failed to defeat Hamas or defeat the Lebanese resistance. They scored a victory in Syria, of course, but it's still not possible to see long term. But the long-range problem is that America's a wounded beast, facing a rising China, facing this alliance between Iran and Russia, and capable of causing great damage because they feel wounded and they feel the tide of history moving against them.
Ms. Krishnaswamy, before we wrap up this segment, I want you to also address the same question, the potential long-term ramifications of this partnership for the region, for West Asia.
So in the to the north of Iran, there's Azerbaijan and Armenia, and we've known that Azerbaijan tends to smuggle oil through Turkey into Israel. With Iran and Russia increasing their border security, that might make it much harder for Azerbaijan to send oil to Israel. And that will definitely make it harder for Israel to enact its belligerence. So that's the one way. The other way is through the idea that if one country is attacked by any of the other countries, Iran will stop providing, Iran or Russia won't provide any material support to the belligerent countries. And so that means that countries will have to think twice before trying to attack Iran. And with regards to the stability of the region that is being destroyed by Israel, Russia actually has a very good beef against Israel, because regardless of how often Israel cries anti-Semitism, they have been supporting Ukrainian fighters that I strongly identify with the Nazi Party, like the Azov Battalion, for many, many years, and providing them with the weapons. So I think it's also in Russia's interest to contain Israel and its belligerents, because we know that they have been providing
Okay, that's all the time we have for tonight's show. Allow me to thank my guests, activist and commentator Vic Napier, joining us from Glasgow, and thanks to journalist and podcaster Esha Krishnaswamy, joining us from St. Petersburg, and a special thanks to you, our viewers, for staying with us on tonight's edition of Spotlight. It's good night for now, and see you next time.